Hello and welcome to this video called How to do PPM with PowerApps, in particular model-driven PowerApps. The reason for this video is that I've been doing consulting in Microsoft Project Online, Project Server for the last 16 years. And the product has been around since 1984. And this video right now is created for you to get a glimpse on the capabilities of the future of project, which is going to be called the project service. One of the announcements that was made back in September 2018 at Ignite was that by building core project management functionality on common data service, so that is called the CDS backend, more on that later, for apps, so PowerApps, we can leverage the PowerApps platform and deepen our integration with Dynamics 365. So in other words, going forward with Microsoft Project, we will see it using the CDS database, PowerApps, but also integrating to Dynamics 365. So what does that mean for you who are sitting in a PMO function, project managers, portfolio managers, and so on? Well, first of all, I'm not going to give you a training or a course outline for getting access to this knowledge. That takes a lot of time, and there are plenty of data and information out there for you to just grasp and learn from. So instead, I'm going to give you a more like a use case intro to how a PMO could operate the system, and especially from a portfolio management perspective. First off, we go to powerapps.microsoft.com. We can sign in. And once we're in, we can see that we are in this area where we can build new environments and build new apps. So I have already created a PPM app 1.0 just for us to get started. But before we get to the app and the nice front end for the users, let's look at the left side here where we have learn, apps, create, data, flow, even AI, that's fairly new, and our solutions, because lots of these apps can be imported and exported and reused. If we go to the data area, that's actually where most would start. There is something called entities, which is probably the most interesting thing for the PMOs. And also very different compared to Project Online. This is not just your custom field. Essentially, all your custom fields that you're familiar with in Project Online are still around. The same thing with lookup tables. But with entities, we can almost make a never-ending hierarchy of data by also rolling up data and rolling them down. So we could have portfolios, programs, projects, sub-projects again, and then tasks. That's up to you. This is not an option we have in Project Online today, where we have the same level of data. We can create projects as an EPT, an enterprise project type. We can create a program as an EPT, but rolling up the data, it's a little bit complex. Now, in the CDS backend, so in this database and the way of managing data, it's very easy to have these relationships. So the entities we have here is to some extent where you would probably start. You could create an entity called a program, a portfolio, a project, a risk, any kind of data that you need to manage. And for each of these that you create, there will be a certain set of custom fields attached to it. Plus, they can relate to each other one-to-one, one-to-many, and so on, back and forth. So clicking on project, it's an entity I've created where we can see there are some fields, relationships, rules, views, forms, dashboards, charts, keys, and data. So even here, we can immediately see what kind of data is inside our entity right now called projects. So we can see that my app has been using this project entity, and for that reason it quickly shows that I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 projects. Some of them attached to a program, so it's a project type of a certain type, percent complete, ROI, budget, cost, and so on. So an example on, again, the custom fields that are connected to this entity. So going to the fields, if you want to create a new field, you just click add a field. And then on the left side, you can quickly give it a name. You can find out what type of field it should be. There are so many to choose from, including the ones called lookup. And lookups will then be able to look up from another entity. So when you are on a project page, you could then have a field saying, please connect this to a portfolio. And for that reason, you would find the portfolios or the portfolio entity. And quickly, those two are now related, and the system will know that. The CDS, the Common Data Service, will understand that, making it very easy for us to also do reporting in Power BI. across different entities. So that's the entity area. For these entities, we also have relationships, as you can see. So there are different ones set up. So a project can belong to a risk, and a risk can belong to a project. Where project sponsors, which is related to the users of our app, and so on. Most of these are set automatically. It's not like you have to go in and define them. It's just done by the system. Then we have business rules. We don't have anyone right now. I'll get back to that later. We have views. And views is when you want to access an overview of all the projects in the entity project. Then there are these views. It's like Project Center for those who are used to it in Project Online. And if you click on active projects, you will see how this view looks like. And you'll be able to change it as well by simply dragging and dropping. So up here we now see how the view looks like. It's a little bit squeezed, but it'll look great when you get into full screen into the app. So that's the view I have made. On the left side, I can see all the unused custom fields and standard fields that are not shown in the view. So if I wanted to, for instance, add the department field to my standard view, I could just drag it up here and release it. And now we can see the department again. Then I can save the view. I could also change the sorting, the filtering, and so on, and publish it. And the moment I publish it, this becomes active inside my PPM app or my PPM solution. So this is how we work with views. So going back again to our main area here, done. We also have what is called the forms. So views were to just look across all the entities, all the data inside the entity project. And forms is when you want to, for instance, create a new project. How does that form look like? And when you want to manage the data, you can create a lot of different forms. Typically, we use the main form. So if we open up this one, you'll see that when users are accessing a project, again, we'll just see the woozy book, like what you see is what you get overview here. So from a user's perspective, you'll see some kind of a stage gate here. You'll see there are some owners, names, portfolios, program. And again, if you wanted to add more information, for instance, created by, just drag and drop into the certain zone like this. And now we can see who's the creator of this project. So again, save, publish, and that's how you can then trim the forms. So just to translate what we're looking at right now into the project online language, this is probably your PDPs, your project detail pages. And you can have many of these like project info, financials, KPIs, etc., etc. So back again to the PowerApps overview. Now you've had a little bit of an intro to entities and views and forms. Charts and dashboards I won't cover right now. We can show that just later in the video. Option sets is your lookups. So if you want to create a lookup, for instance, KPIs, I think I did that recently. So KPIs. Then for KPI, you have three options: perfect, good, bad. So this is just your standard lookup fields that different entities and fields and entities can connect to. Good. Data integration allows us to quickly import and export data. Typically, it's very fast because you can actually just take a spreadsheet and import it immediately into CDS. There's a whole mapping template. My environment right now doesn't allow it, but there are many videos out there explaining exactly how to do that. So what we're going to do now instead is go back to the apps overview and open up my PPM app here. So by clicking here, it launches the app, which can also be found on and worked from an iPad, inside Teams, your cell phones, and so many things. It's responsive. That's one of the great things. So here, as you can see, I have my project entities. You can see the department field we just added to the view called Active Projects is now here. There are all these other views as well if needed. There's the percent complete, the ROI, and so on and so on. If I, for instance, open up the Build an iOS app, you go into the form, and from the form you can now see that the created by has now been added as well. The same thing applies for all the other fields. It's all about managing the fields inside the views, and the same thing when it comes to fields inside the forms. So forms being this, and your views being this. That's important to understand. So back to this one, here are just some basic examples where I can go in and select drivers, for instance, or I can create new drivers or pick them up from a library. I have drivers here. I can go in and, for instance, write I'm now 80% done. This is right now very manual. And we have something called custom controls also in PowerApps in general. And this one up here is a custom control. You can have it be read-only, or you can actually use it by just clicking on it and just setting, for instance, percent complete up here. Just an example of a visualization. The same thing applies for finances, where I can see there's a budget in 2019, 2020, 2021, an actual cost as well. And if I write 180,000, it will do a change down here as well. So that's also a custom control. And if you want to, you could just do drag and drop instead. And of course, some would prefer to have actual cost coming in from a separate system, an ERP system, which would be fairly easy because there's a whole setting here to then do that integration. So it can just have a routine job picking up from a spreadsheet or a CSV file and importing that data to CDS perhaps once a day. KPIs as an example, there are some KPIs. I have decided to then show the perfect, good, bad options as not a KPI, but close to. This is also a custom control that can be found right now. So I just prefer it to look like this instead of me having to kind of access a lookup table. There can be some statusing where you can write your comments if that's needed, like this, and an overall status if that's needed, and then you can obviously save. Up here you have your stage gate model where you can click and see that to be in control of this stage you have to have a budget, which I have, so I can move on to the next stage. So in the execute stage we need to have a status. We need to be here until we are 100% done with the project, which is what we are right now. If I delete this field, we will see that we are now not compliant. So this is kind of like your checklist that can be built into the stage gate model, which we call a business process. So going back again to the overview, we also have portfolios. And again, that's just an entity that I have created over in this area. So just to give you an idea again on how it works, if we click on portfolios here, you will notice that we have my custom fields, portfolio manager, description, currency, and those are the built-in fields. So if I just want to see my custom fields, I click custom, and here we have them all. So again, we have the views, we have the forms, and for the form, if we click on main here, we can see that, just a second, that when we create a new portfolio or we want to manage it, there is, and it's very small, I know, so I'm sorry for that. If we just click on this one, we can probably see a little bit more. Not so much. Just a second, here we go. Name, owner, portfolio manager, strategic theme, description, budget 2019, 2020, 2021. And a total budget as well over here. And that's because, again, for this kind of entity, we have created some fields, and those are the same fields you see here. So going to our view again for the, sorry, that was over here, for the portfolios. So clicking on IT application will bring us to this view, where we can have the portfolio manager, which could be me, for instance. There you go. We have a strategic theme, which is actually something that comes from this library down here that I've created. So another entity, a description, and we also have a budget that could be 80,000, and we have 75,000 in 2020, and we have 90,000 in 2021. And when I click save, it calculates the total budget for this portfolio, so we can always compare that to the projects that are going on inside this portfolio. So one of the strengths here is about CDS and the many relationships you can do is that when I go to a project now, and remember this name is IT applications. So if I go to a project and we create a new project, and we call it a new IT project, just quickly, and we then select a portfolio being the IT applications like this. It could also be a program, ERP integration. There could also be a type, and so on and so on. If I then go to save here and go to financials here, and we add some numbers, so 500,000 and 50,000 spent, and then we go to budget, that's 100,000, 0, and budget 2021, 150,000, and no actuals. So let's save that. So now if we go back to the portfolio overview here, we can actually see that from this view, we can't see the sum of budget that's going on inside this portfolio. What we can do right now is that we can click IT applications, and we can then click on related, And we can quickly see that there are related programs and projects to this application or to this portfolio. So if I click on projects, we can see that the new IT project is actually connected to the portfolio, which is great. So if we now wanted to roll up data right here and showcase what's the cost of the entire portfolio, we could quickly just add that view here. And I've done that already in the programs entity. So if we click on programs, which is the same thing as a portfolio, it's just an entity. Here you can actually see that the program called ERP integration has a budget, the entire program, 2.5, project cost, so the consumption of budget or cost from projects that are connected to the ERP program, the actual cost of this program, which is all the actual cost from the project, and the created on. If we click on it, we can also see when it was last updated. And because we just updated some numbers on one of our projects, we can then quickly just force a recalc here, like this. And now we can see the project cost is 1.590 out of the 2.5 that has been set aside for this program. This synchronization job runs typically 12 hours, after 12 hours, so twice a day. But if you can't wait for it, you can always just force it to calculate or set up a flow that automatically pushes the updates. But for most, it's fine that it updates a couple of times a day. Again, related. So for the programs, what are the related projects? We can click here. There are 2 projects, new IT project and substreams. We can even create new projects while being inside the program, so like a sub-project, so it automatically knows that this one should be attached to this program. So I'm showing you right now some of the things that have been a little bit tricky to do in Project Online as a standard, that are very powerful right now in the CDS. So risk would be the same thing, of course. You can create risks in here, or anyone can, and just say new and create a risk called the risk 200. Connected to a project, the new IT project, a description, we can have some impact, medium, cost being 50,000 if it happens, probability, let's put that at 40%, and steps to mitigate, for instance, like this. So again, quite easily done creating a risk, done in many different ways. And the moment we do that, we can again go back to the project, the new IT project, which we have right here. And again, we now should have some relationships here. So related, now we also have risks. So if we click on risks, we'll see that this project has a risk called risk 200. So this is one of the really powerful things that you can just keep going with your entities and connecting them by ways, or 2 ways actually, which is really powerful, especially in your report layer. And speaking of reports that I want to bring into this video, if we click on reports down here, I have enabled Power BI as part of my solution here in the Power App, so that I can now also access all the data and showcase it from within the app without having to leave it. So what you're seeing right now is all the projects. It hasn't updated since yesterday, as you can see, but all the projects, just using a dashboard from standard Power BI and connect that to the CDS. So that's one way of showing data. You can also click on it and go further down into the reports. You could have different tiles from your dashboard and just click on them and go straight into it, or even open up the entire Power BI report from here. Going back to reports, you also have other ways of building data or visualizing data, which could be the dashboards that are more standard in Dynamics 365 and the PowerApps model-driven. If you click on this one, you'll see all the projects that you have. This is a view, or stream it's called. If we click on Show Visual Filter, you can see that below here we have these projects grouped by run and grow, so the project type. And if we click on this one called run, we'll only see those 3 projects, and we can then further drill down and open them up, and so on and so on. That's another way of showcasing data. We can also have standard charts built into it, more classical approach to reporting in Dynamics 365. So that was kind of the brief intro to those that are perhaps thinking, so when project is coming out in a new version, how will this work for me? How can I manage my portfolio? Because we've only heard about perhaps the way of managing a project. So think of projects and project in the new service that's coming called Project Service as an entity made by Microsoft, which is predefined with a lot of these custom fields. And then you can take that entity project, including the Gantt chart and some of the things that I'm missing right now in this presentation, and connect that to a portfolio layer with a never-ending hierarchy of relationships that you need, from budgets, resources, risks, issues, and so on and so on. And finally, what you can also do from a model-driven PowerApps especially is to connect, let's take a project, let's take this one, and quickly set up also a Word template and have your own template. So when you click on this one, it drops all the data real time into a Word document that has been predefined. We open it up and you'll see that the data from this one is just brought into this view. And obviously you can keep extending this Word document and making it look even better. If you wanted to work with PowerPoint and other things, there are very strong connectors from my company, Projectum, that can help you do that. Also insert charts directly. But out of the box, you can also bring this kind of simple data, text, numbers, and so on, straight into Word in real time. So back to PowerApps. To conclude this view here, if we go to the Apps Overview and click on the app again here, now the way you can configure the app all up, oh sorry, that was too fast, click on Edit here, is this view. So what we saw before in the beginning of this video was me going into a view and doing certain changes, looking at a custom field, which you can do. But if you want to see the full overview of what's going on inside my PPM app here, we have a sitemap. So that's kind of like our hierarchy in the left side. So if we look at this one, projects, tasks, portfolios, programs, all of this, that's what you see right here. And each of these are then related to an entity. So clicking on projects will bring you to the entity called project. Clicking on portfolios will bring you to the entity portfolio. So that's how we set it up. If you want to look at a report, you can click here and you'll see that this is a report area where you can have other types of views, a dashboard, a web page of some kind, a URL, so on. So back again to the app designer. Then we have the dashboards. We won't go into that right now, but what is important is the business process flow, because that's actually where we can set up our workflows. So if we open this one up, you'll see that we have, in just a second, a new way of showing workflows compared to those that are used to SharePoint Designer. So we'll just wait a little bit. It should be here in just a second. And it's coming here. So as you saw on this page here, initiate, business case, execute, close. So then going back to this one, or where did I leave my flow? Sorry, maybe it's down here. It is. So here you see the same stages: project, initiate, business case, execute, close. And for each of these stages, you can do many things. You can have, for instance, a data step here that validates that you have entered a sponsor, because that is required. And you can add even more steps, a workflow, an approval flow, certain conditions. So if something is above or below a certain level of threshold, the stage gate model here, or the process, will do something for you. So that's how you work with the stage gates. And if you want to have multiple stage gates, then you can also, over here, quickly go into a project and always select a different process, or we can make sure that the system will automatically pick the right process for you. So if you click on switch process, you can see that I only have one stage gate model right now called project stage gate, and you could then have multiple different sets of governance, more or less, up here. So big projects, small projects, IT projects, and so on. So this kind of concludes on my introduction video to model-driven PowerApps and how to do PPM activities. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope that you can see the power of the Power Platform. So CDS, model-driven PowerApps, perhaps even Canvas apps that I will cover in another session. The way to do reporting using Power BI or exporting to Word, and so on and so on. There are so many things we can do. And for those of you using Project Online today, don't worry, you can keep using Project Online, or you can at some point flip to this new project service when it's out. You can also do it in parallel. So one department uses Project Online, another uses, in this case, Project Service. So that's all up to you. And the good part is that no matter what you do, the license you have today will cover both solutions, both Project Service and the more traditional Project Online. I will cover much of more content and do much more knowledge sharing and videos and so on my blog, ppmblog.org. So be sure that you keep up with what I'm doing, and feel free to reach out and send me some questions if you have concerns or other things that you would like me to answer to. Thank you for watching. Bye.